everybody, welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. This is a special episode. It is a topical episode. I am here with Dr. Will Brooker, one of the world's leading experts on Batman, who I love to call Dr. Batman. Dr. Batman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's good to be here again.
Now, Will, for those who are like a PhD thesis on Batman, what? Like, what does that mean? We got a whole episode about that already. It was a while ago even. That was I looked this up, that was episode 20 of the show where we talked about that thesis and kind of your history with Batman. Then, nearly 100 episodes later, Will came back to talk about The Dark Knight Returns, which was at the time new. That's the third Christopher Nolan, right? I always get that wrong.
Rises,
Dark Knight Rises. We talked about Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
The weekend it was released.
Yeah.
And then last summer, Will came back one more time when we were doing a run of episodes about how to enjoy things, and we talked about Batman comics and how to enjoy comics and how to enjoy Batman comics and kind of some on-ramps for potential newbies. So that's kind of the history of Will being on the show. But today, we are going to, of course, be discussing the new movie, Batman vs. Superman. We are recording this on Easter Sunday. Thank you for making time on Easter Sunday, Will.
That's my pleasure.
The movie just came out, and, like I've been talking about since we started the show just now, Will, you were one of the leading experts on Batman, so I cannot wait to hear what you think of the movie.
I think there was a good movie in there somewhere. I think it probably could have been re-edited with additional scenes into a decent movie. I don't want to add to the negativity about this movie, which has got a 30% rating on Rotten Tomatoes now. I think it's more interesting and more challenging to try and find positive things to say about it than to continue being negative about it. So I'm trying to think the things that I liked. I liked Alfred, which is Jeremy Irons. I thought that was a very well-played, interesting take on Alfred. I thought Affleck's Batman was actually pretty good. I liked the way he looked.
Yeah, I like that too.
I liked the way he spoke. Very kind of solid. I liked him as Bruce Wayne. He had a kind of conscience. I felt he was probably one of the best elements, really. He was a lot better than Superman. And another thing, I thought Wonder Woman was good once she appeared, and I liked the music that came on when she first appeared. It was like
that music was good.
A video game where a new challenger appears or something, where you kind of put some money in and a new character appears, like a bonus, I like that. That was an exciting moment. So, Wonder Woman and Batman. And to be fair, Diana Prince, as we only heard her name once, but I liked Wonder Woman in her civilian persona and her interactions with Bruce Wayne and Alfred. So, I like those bits.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you in that I would agree that it is more challenging to find positive things to say about the movie, but that they do exist and they were there, and I think all the things that you already cited. I mean, so Batman is kind of your thing, if you don't mind me saying. So let's dig into that Ben Affleck. And I think it's probably okay if we get into specific points in the movie, otherwise known as spoilers, because frankly, there aren't that many. There were so many in the trailers. Like, it's not like, I don't even know if there's like a ton of surprises left waiting for you.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's just rip off that seal and feel free to talk about whatever in the movie as specifically as possible. I mean, despite the reviews, I think it's like 1 billion people are still going to see it. So Batman, Ben Affleck, what's new about Ben Affleck? What did Ben Affleck do with the character that's different than what Christian Bale did and Michael Keaton? What did he bring to it?
It's a Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns Batman. I mean, that's pretty obvious. There are scenes in the movie which are a direct tribute to Dark Knight Returns directly. I mean, almost kind of frame by frame, although in a different setting. There's a scene where there's like a thug with a gun, and we kind of focus on the wall behind him, and you just know that Batman is going to reach his hand through the wall and grab the thug's armor, and indeed it did happen. And then, there's another guy saying, I'll shoot, and Batman says, I believe you. That's straight out of Dark Knight Returns, which is it's 30 years old now. So, I do enjoy that book, but they're harking back to something from three decades ago. He's an older Batman.
Right.
We know Christian Bale's Batman in Dark Knight Rises had been retired for 7 or 8 years, I think. But this Batman, I think he says, has been fighting crime for 20 years. Mm-hmm. There's been a Robin in the picture who's been killed by Joker. That's pretty clearly implied. We see his costume in the Batcave with kind of Joker graffiti on it.
So I thought that was kind of interesting because Okay, so let's get into some comic book history just briefly here. So Joker in the 80s, about the time of Dark Knight Returns, I guess, killed Robin. There was a contest to see if Robin, or a vote to see if Robin would live or die. Fans voted him dead, and the Joker killed Robin. This is like a major, generally, I think, considered a major moment in Batman history.
Yeah, it was the Jason Todd Robin, wasn't it? I mean, there's been lots of Robins, so it was one Robin, yeah. He was replaced afterwards by Tim Drake, and it wasn't Dick Grayson, the original Robin, anyway. But it was a Robin who was killed by Joker, yeah. So
and that's a big deal. Like, you know, so there, especially for a lot of people that think of Batman as like 60s and campy or whatever, which I don't have to tell you about. But I feel like Batman is traditionally depicted as having Jason Todd's costume in the Batcave, right? Like that, you see that in other Batmans. But here, he is keeping the costume up despite the fact that it has been defaced by Joker. And it says something like, ha, 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 got you again, or something. So
joke's on you or something,
That's new, right? Like that decision to like have him holding this costume that's defaced up. That's new, right?
That is new, but I think that's an easy kind of visual shorthand for anyone who knows anything about the Joker for to clue us in that it was Joker that did it. You know, without including another dream sequence, I think we probably had enough dream sequences without Batman flashing back to... They probably shot that. I imagine they probably shot that scene, and it'd probably be in the R-rated version, won't it?
That movie has... This movie, the one we just saw, Batman vs. Robin, has four dream sequences, including a dream sequence inside of another dream sequence.
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell which is dream sequence and not. I didn't know if when Superman sees his dad, if that's totally a dream, or if the bit where he's walking up the hill is real and his vision of his dad is a dream, or what. It's not very clearly signaled. One of Batman's dreams, I think, is a kind of flash forward, probably a preview of what's going to happen.
Sure, a preview for the next movie.
Yeah, that's right.
But wait, getting back to that costume, though, I just thought it was kind of interesting to make that, like, the idea that Batman would keep that on display, even with, like, the Joker taunting him on it, just makes it even darker. Like, it seems like that decision to me, and I guess, like, you can kind of look at that over a lot of the decisions that were made around Batman and just how dark the movie is, you know?
I think the idea was, you know, this is a very tough Batman. The idea was probably that he's keeping up to motivate himself, you know, to remind himself why he does this. This is a very unforgiving, unrelenting Batman. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that. It's very much like the Arkham video games. There's a fight scene towards the end which features heavily in one of the trailers. It's at the start of one of the trailers, but actually occurs towards the end of the movie. And it's very much like watching a fight scene in a video game in a pretty good way, actually. I mean, I found it fairly enjoyable because the rest of the movie was not very enjoyable. I think that was pretty well choreographed and orchestrated. It's got some very inventive combat moves, all very, very solid, very brutal, yeah.
I also thought of the video game there, and that part is pretty good, and it's also right next to the part where Superman finally fights Doomsday, and that part was pretty good. It just made me recognize that, like, you know, for the movie actually, until that last part, it is... Somehow, even though it's called Superman vs. Batman, neither a Superman nor a Batman movie. Like, you don't get a lot of either of them until the very end there when they finally get to do their thing.
Yeah, I guess I felt it was more a Batman movie. Perhaps that's because we've seen this Superman before in Man of Steel, but this is the first time we've seen Affleck's Batman. So, and I guess I'm more of a Batman fan anyway. So for me, I was more interested in what they were going to do with that character because, you know, we haven't seen Batman and Alfred in this universe before, so it's almost worth seeing. It's almost worth seeing for that. I didn't personally like that Doomsday fight. I thought that was very CGI. I'm afraid I kind of lost interest.
Yeah, there was a good article on I think it was Birth Movies Death, I'm sure it was, in fact, about kind of comparing that to the Avengers fight and how in the Avengers, when the Avengers fight, you know, you can see the teamwork in the fighting. Like, they're not just fighting because it looks cool, like, but you can see that, like, someone is knocking someone down and then Thor hits him with his hammer, or, like, Iron Man deflects his beam off of Captain America's shield, or Iron Man, you know, brings the party to them, and, like, you can see that they're all working together. Whereas here, it felt much more just like three people hitting someone, and, like, when things worked out, like, it almost felt like a coincidence. Like, there's zero communication between them.
Yeah, I think that is one of the problems with this movie, which Avengers has managed to solve. The reason I enjoy those Avengers movies is because there's such a sense of characterization and interaction. I think we feel we know those characters, we know what the characters want, we know what their relationships are with each other. I mean, I'm going to enjoy Captain America Civil War, even though I'm not a big Marvel fan, because, you know, Tony versus Steve is, it's an interesting dynamic. We kind of feel these guys have a history, they're friends, they're going to fall out. We feel what they want and what their relationships are with each other. Whereas with Batman, Luthor, Wonder Woman, and who have I left out? No, it's just four of them. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Luthor. We didn't know what any of them wanted. I think all their motivations were confused.
Yeah, and I think just the fact that you called it Tony versus Steve says a lot, that you don't even call it Captain America versus Iron Man. You're on a first-name basis with them,
Absolutely. As they are, exactly. Yeah, exactly. These guys, we can't really tell what they're fighting for. I mean, I think Luthor was one of the worst elements. He was so kind of mixed up. What is he really trying to do? And the Batman versus Superman fight was kind of something he orchestrated, which I find hard to believe that Superman and Batman are really so stupid. They're going to allow themselves to get manipulated by like puppets by this kind of Mark Zuckerberg type supervillain.
Yeah, Batman did not exactly come off as the world's greatest detective in this movie.
No, he didn't. But also, Superman is standing right next to a bomb and doesn't kind of hear it or see it.
Right.
These
That's a great point.
Yeah, the one thing I really kind of tuned out, I think, is where Luthor says to Superman, you've got to fight Batman. You've got to bring me Batman's head, or else I'm going to kill your mother. But, like, Superman could be over across the city and rescued his mum in a second. And then he has to get Batman to do it. But this is like a god. We've seen his powers. We've seen that he can fly to Africa. We've seen that he can come back from the top of a mountain and rescue Lois mid-drop from a skyscraper. The idea that Superman has to do what Luthor tells him to just really strained my credibility.
Now, I think there's sort of in the same way that I think people were really upset with, let me be more specific, nerds were really upset with the ending of Man of Steel, where Superman kills General Zod, and a lot of people felt like Superman doesn't kill. There's like sort of a minor nerd controversy brewing around this movie around how violent Batman is, because Batman... I mean, so I kind of have mixed... I actually kind of want to defend the movie here, because I think I've heard people say that it's bad because Batman kills people. And that doesn't... I mean, first of all, did that bump you at all? Did that bother you, like how violent he was? I mean, he was branding people. That's pretty extreme for Batman, right?
Yeah, I think... Well, branding is something I don't remember ever seeing in comics. I don't think we actually see him kill people, definitely, do we? I mean, we see him... deal out just.
I think it's actually not that far from previous Batman movies where you don't see him shoot anyone in the head, obviously, but you do see him do things that like clearly are going to result in the death of someone. Like, in the same way, like he fires like a missile and like explodes someone off of a building. Like, yeah, that guy's dead. But also, if you go back to like Michael Keaton Batman, like he throws a Joker henchman like down a bell tower. Like that guy is also dead. Even though they don't show him like ceasing to breathe, it's pretty clear Batman is doing something that's gonna result in death.
Yeah, I think that's right. I feel the same way about Daredevil. I mean, the Daredevil on Netflix at the moment is a big deal. He says to Punisher, I don't kill. But we see Daredevil doing a lot of stuff where it's like we don't actually see the guy die, but he's going to be pretty severely injured if not. There is, in Batman's dream sequence, it's a bit jarring. He uses a gun in the conventional way.
Right. I actually noticed he uses a lot of guns in this movie, because there's the dream sequence where he's like hitting people with guns. And then...
No, he shoots the gun as well.
He shoots the gun in the dream sequence?
I'm pretty sure he does, yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, at the very least, he's touching guns there. But there's also, he uses a Gatling gun trap on Superman, and his car has a gun. His plane has a gun that he's firing. I guess we don't see bullets go through anyone, but he's firing the Gatling gun from his plane pretty willy-nilly. And also his kryptonite gas dispenser is a gun. And none of them are exactly like he takes a pistol and shoots someone, but like that's 5 examples of Batman using a gun, which is something he's not traditionally depicted doing. Like that's a pretty compelling case to me that Batman is using guns. I don't think that's why the movie's bad. Like that's not my problem with the movie. But it does seem to go against what a pretty major core tenet of Batman, right?
It's a pretty major. I mean, it's one of the things that makes Batman, isn't it? He doesn't use guns and he doesn't kill. Those are one of the things we know. And I think that's a really important character type, actually, because if Batman was to use guns, he'd be pretty much unbeatable. Part of the point about Batman is one of his limits, isn't it? Characters need to have
it's like his weakness.
I mean, we know that Batman has got so much plot armor. You always say, who would win? Batman, if he had time to prepare, would beat pretty much anyone. the fact that Batman won't use a gun is one of those useful limitations that makes a fight more interesting. So
right.
I think that's one of the reasons. Also, of course, it's because his parents were killed by a gun. Because we actually see that at the start of the movie, and he's still so hung up about his parents. There is a reason included at the start of the movie why he wouldn't touch a gun. So,
I thought that was just to set up that his mom's name was Martha.
Oh, well, that's yeah, that was important.
Yeah, that's true. And I actually remember from one of your earlier appearances on the show, and I was upset because you recommended a book, and then you just started to describe it, and Batman had a son in it. And I was like, well, Batman doesn't have a son. And then we kind of talked about, like, well, what are the things that make, like, there are, like, 3 core tenets or whatever they are of Batman. Like, what are the things that make Batman Batman? Because there all are these different interpretations. And, like, not using guns is a pretty big one.
Yeah, he has no superpowers. He doesn't kill, doesn't use guns. His parents are dead. I don't know. He's very rich. There are a few well, we could go further down the list, but I think, one of the main things is he doesn't have superpowers. But I think not using guns is a pretty important part of what makes Batman Batman. And you can use things which look like a gun, but to actually pick up a gun with bullets and use it like a gun, is breaking the rule, I think. I
want to try to follow your suggestion and focus on at least some of the positive. But one thing I just want to quickly express my disappointment with is, I feel like Zack Snyder in this movie didn't really have a take on Gotham. Like, if you think about Tim Burton Batman, like, you can close your eyes and picture that city. And Chris Nolan, it's, like, a little more realistic, but still, like, what that Gotham looks like. Like, here, you really don't know, and, like, it's just kind of across the street from Metropolis. Right. I'm just wondering, did you have any take on, like, just the setting, like, Batman's world?
They looked pretty similar, didn't they? I got to say, visually, I don't think I could really tell when they crossed from Metropolis to Gotham, and that's pretty important. Again, Snyder is supposed to be a big kind of comics fan, and one of the most important things about Gotham and Metropolis is one of those things he stresses. He has Luthor say during the movie, it's like day versus night. That's the whole point about Metropolis. They're both kind of New York, but the polar opposite of each other. One is, New York on a June day in midsummer at 2:00 in the afternoon, a sunny afternoon, and Gotham is like New York on Halloween in a bad area. So it's really important that they're different cities, I think, and we didn't feel that at all.
I think that's right. I mean, Batman, he had, like, his mansion was just kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was dilapidated, right? That was the man. But it was, like, the first few times they went there, and there was an establishing shot. I didn't even fully understand that was supposed to be the mansion. Like, I didn't understand what the setting was, No,
I didn't the first time either.
I gotta tell you, Will, if you, a man who wrote his PhD thesis on Batman, doesn't recognize the Wayne Manor when they show it, like, that's problematic for the film.
I understood it the second time. Yeah, you're right. I mean, as I say, there's so much in the movie, you can't help thinking they could have cut some stuff and included other stuff, which would make it make more sense.
I don't love to play, like, armchair director and be like, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that, but, like, what would you like to have seen in the movie?
I think I wouldn't have had Doomsday in the movie. I think what they're doing there is trying to cross Dark Knight Returns with the death of Superman story. I think adding Doomsday and the whole Zod thing was a step too far. I think I'm not even sure about Luthor in it, really. I mean, Dark Knight Returns is a pretty good story on its own, You could do a lot worse than just trying to adapt that. And in that, Batman tries to stop Superman because Superman is an agent of the government, basically, and Superman is trying to stop Batman because he's too rogue, He needs to be corralled in. And in that book, because it's set in 1986, Reagan is the president, and Superman is kind of, his super soldier. And so there's a good political reason there. You don't need Luthor, who was a very unconvincing villain, setting these two guys up in some kind of gladiator match. For some reason, that doesn't make a lot of sense. He was abused by his dad, and so he doesn't believe in God and so on. I think if Snyder's such a comic book fan, and we saw he adapted Watchmen, or at least he did a valiant but messy job of that.
Yeah, I don't hate his Watchmen adaptation, actually.
No, it's not terrible. I mean, maybe just stick to Dark Knight Returns, which is a really, really good story on its own.
Well, the thing about Dark Knight Returns is that it takes place in the future, and it's kind of interesting how they split the difference here, because Dark Knight Returns is like, he's like, I mean, how old's Batman in that? 70, maybe? 80?
He's 50, I think.
Oh, he's 50? I apologize.
Yeah,
but he's, I think, older than Ben Affleck is as depicted here. Like, he's like sort of at the end of his rope there, whereas I don't think Ben Affleck is quite there yet,
Isn't Affleck around 45 or something? I think this Batman seemed to be in his 40s. So
I guess that's true. I guess that's true. It just I mean, there's like an apocalyptic vibe of Dark Knight Returns that if you fully, like, completely adapted it would probably prevent you from bringing, you know, the rest of the world and making it a part of the broader DC universe, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say was a priority for this film.
That's a good point, because Dark Knight Returns is set after Batman's retirement, and Hal Jordan has gone back up to the stars, and you know,
all
Flash and Wonder Woman. So,
I mean, Earth has fallen apart or something, but it's kind of interesting the way they split the difference. Where, like, it is in the future, and actually, that is one of the things I liked about it. Like, I liked that Batman is. Just that, like, Batman is deep into his career actually makes it pretty unique because, you know, in terms of cinematic depictions of Batman.
Yeah, I like that too, because in Batman Begins, you know, we see a young Batman making mistakes. So it's good to see someone who's been on the job for so long. You know, he's actually professional. And it's kind of enjoyable when we see him take out that warehouse full of goons, you know, that you see in the trailer. I like the bit where he jumps off the top of the Batplane and everything. You know, it's good to see this guy who is really on top of his game. He's so on top of his game, it's almost boring for him. You know, it's just not a strain for him. And that is interesting as a different, if we compare it to Bale in Batman Begins, where he's kind of falling off fire escapes and he's not quite Batman yet.
Right.
So that's an interesting take on Batman. You know, Batman who's really, really cynical, really brilliant at the job. He's suffered some losses. He's lost Robin, and he's kind of bitter, but he's just really, really brilliant at what he does. I like that. That's a good concept, but I think it was kind of wasted.
I'm excited to see the next. I mean, I think it says something because I remember when Ben Affleck was announced as Batman, you know, the internet, and they love to have a field day with everything, and people were like, you know, jokes and memes, and even though this movie is definitely not being super well received in all corners, I think everyone kind of agrees that Ben Affleck is pretty good. I think it is generally agreed upon by the nerd hive mind that this is 0% Ben Affleck's fault. You know, like, he is not at all at fault for this movie. And none of the cast. And I think people. I think Wonder Woman was like a big hit. I think that she's been very uncontroversial, and that actually almost makes the movie's badness even more remarkable because the cast is fine. Like, usually if there's a bad movie, there's bad acting, but that's actually not what's going on here. The movie itself is flawed.
I really couldn't. I hated all the scenes with Luthor in, I have to say. I thought that performance, that characterization was really awful. It's like a really bad impression of Heath Ledger's Joker.
Yeah.
And I actually read somewhere on the Nerd Hive Mind, you know, a theory that perhaps they'd intended to have Joker and Luthor in it and they were combined into the one character. It does seem like a Jokerish kind of. That's not how I see Luthor at all. And it wasn't just because he has kind of hair and he's younger. And I think he's the son of Lex Luthor. I mean, they call him Alexander Luthor more in this one. So
right, which is kind of a Death of Superman era thing. Right?
Yeah, there is a younger Luthor in comics, yeah.
I believe he's a clone of the older Lex Luthor, pretending, or something like that. You know comic books.
There's one where he's actually a good guy, Alex Luthor. Anyway,
I mean, I didn't hate Jesse Eisenberg in that movie, and I kind of liked, as someone who's worked at a lot of .com companies, I kind of liked the idea. I liked that he was like playing basketball with his coworkers and he didn't have an office. I thought I really wanted, and I liked the idea of like Zuckerberg as Lex Luthor. I think is really interesting, and there's a lot you could play with there. But I kind of wanted like one moment where it seemed like he had it together, like one actually clever moment, you know, like one like really clever devious thing, and like I don't know that I got that.
No one in it seemed very clever. I guess that's another problem. It seemed like a kind of stupid movie in that all of the characters did stupid things. And especially, you know, as we were saying, Batman, the world's greatest detective, and Superman is kind of like a god who can see through walls and hear things across the world. The fact that, you know, everyone just seemed to not be acting for good reasons. There didn't seem to be a good rationale behind what anyone did.
Oh, yeah, like when Superman... I mean... And this is really the problem with the movie. The problem with the movie is not that Batman is violent. I'm sure you could make a terrific movie where Batman has a machine gun. Like, that is certainly possible. Yeah. That doesn't make the movie bad. The real problem with the movie I have is that, like, almost every single scene, if you think about it, like, doesn't make sense. Like, why anyone would... Like, when Superman stops the Batmobile... Great scene, like it's in all the trailers, of course, and it actually it's probably 90 minutes into the movie, and it's like the first time you really sit up. But if you actually stop and think about it, it doesn't make sense that Superman wouldn't have stopped him while he was chasing the car. That why he let the bad guys get away, like nothing. You know, like if you actually, it feels like so many scenes in this movie are there to set up like to get you to the moment that he wants to show. We had like Superman punching Doomsday, or Batman fighting a bunch of dudes, like or Batman pulling Superman out of the car, or Superman pulling Batman out of the car. Like, so much of the movie is sort of just like not good in and of itself, and it's sort of worked backwards to get you to some arbitrary point you want to get to.
I think that's a really good way of putting it. I mean, it's almost like a movie which would work it's almost like a really, really long trailer in that it's kind of about cool-looking moments, but they just do not make sense. It almost makes as much sense logically as the trailer. You know, like in a trailer, you know, you jump there, you jump there, you jump there. Oh, man, this movie's going to be great because look at all these great, cool moments, or look at all these beats. But they're in the same kind of out-of-logical sequence in the movie. And you're absolutely right. That's the problem. There's just too many plot holes.
Another good one. And there's actually a really good movie about this on Birth Movies Death too, just like questions the movie left. But another good one is just that I didn't understand when I watched the movie is there's this whole thing about how Lois is let's just put Lois in a box and not even discuss Lois in this movie. Like that's.
Oh, I thought Lois was all right.
Oh, really? I thought in terms of characters doing nonsensical things, Lois is like top of the list in this movie. But so Lois is in the desert and Superman has to rescue her, and a bunch of people are killed. So there's some sort of betrayal there. It's like kind of unclear what happened, and then somehow like everyone on Earth is mad at Superman about it. Yeah. And I was kind of unclear, like, and this is a major part of the movie. Like everyone is mad because a lot of the movie is about how people don't trust Superman, and they don't trust him because of this incident. And even days later, I'm still kind of unclear do people think Superman shot everyone in the desert? Like
exactly.
I really don't understand. And then that movie.
The same with the bomb. The same with the bomb in the Capitol. Like, how could Superman be responsible for that?
And then at the end of the movie, after the Doomsday fight, everyone's happy with Superman again, even though there was just this another city-destroying battle caused by something from Krypton.
That's right.
Like everyone immediately flips on Superman, and there's no. It's not shown at all, like why that turning around, or people saying, "Oh, we were wrong. He sacrificed himself," or whatever. Like it just. I don't know. It's just like, oh yeah, he wanted to show, and now we're really getting. This is the one thing that was unspoiled by the trailers. But like, you know, he wanted to show that shot of Superman's coffin, so they did that.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, that's what it is. He's got a bunch of cool things he wants to show you, and he hasn't worked out the structure. You know, the train tracks that have to take you from here to here. It's like a kind of roller coaster. You know, where you just see a tableau and then you move on, you see another tableau, but there really is. He's got to think about story. It's absolutely incredible to me that a movie could have got to this point and so much money's got into it and no one's kind of thought, well, how does this join up? Why is this character doing this thing? If you took this thing to a creative writing workshop, everyone would be pointing out, you know, okay, but why did A get to, how come A jumped to F's or something? Where's all the points? Where's all the points in between? There's too much that doesn't make sense. And you're absolutely right. The philosophical questions that he's trying to hang on this about God and man and, you know, good and evil and responsibility, they don't work either because the structure that's supposed to underpin it isn't there either. There's no rationale behind it.
Right. When Superman and Batman finally stopped fighting, I felt nothing. I wasn't like, you know, I didn't understand why they stopped fighting. And I'm a reasonably intelligent person who had been paying attention to the film. Like, it was not at all emotional for me. And when Superman died, it wasn't emotional for me.
No.
You know, Superman's death really doesn't work because, like, what kind of idiot do you think we are that we don't know Superman's not coming back? To like play it off like Superman might actually be dead is borderline insulting, you know. And then the movie ends.
We saw him about 20 minutes before that get nuked and seem to be dead, and then come back. We've already seen him come back.
Yeah, that's a great point. He just died a moment ago.
Yeah, he just died.
But like the last shot is like dust rising up, and it's like, oh, maybe he's not dead. And like, yeah, of course he's not fucking dead. This is only the second movie he's in. He's obviously
they're trying to do an Inception there, aren't they, with the spinning top at the end of Nolan's Inception.
Right, but the end of Inception's good because it's like they're never going to make Inception 2, so it does like really leave you with a lot to think about, whereas like clearly Superman, like, is Superman alive? Yeah, he's alive. He's fucking Superman. He's like the centerpiece of this billion-dollar franchise that just extremely laboriously launched.
Yeah,
I'm getting worked up. Right. That's the thing about this movie. The more I think about it, the less I like it.
Yeah. Well, I kind of, you know, I would like to like it. I would like to have enjoyed it.
Of course. I mean, I paid and saw it. I was hoping I'd enjoy the experience. And I guess I kind of did. I didn't outright, as much as we're complaining about it, like, it's not quite a Green Lantern level train wreck. Like, there are certainly redeeming qualities, the performances being one of them. And like, maybe if it sets up a good Batman movie and a good Wonder Woman movie, it'll have been worth it. That's not worth saying. Like, you could have just made those movies without making another movie up.
I'll say this for it. I would watch an Affleck Batman movie, and I would watch a Wonder Woman movie by this team. Not with great expectations, but I expect they might be better than that. I'll tell you, I mean, I wouldn't watch a Flash movie or an Aquaman movie or a Cyborg movie based on this at all. Oh, let me just say that as well. The introduction of the Justice League.
Oh, my goodness.
Really badly done.
Really badly. So not to endlessly compare it to Marvel movies, I kind of feel bad doing that, but it does make you appreciate kind of the elegance of the Marvel end credits sequence, because if there was a scene in the middle of Iron Man 1 where Samuel L. Jackson shows up with no introduction and you're expected to know who he is, that would derail Iron Man 1 and make it a worse movie. But when you kind of separate it and put in the end credits, it's like, do whatever you want. Like, you know, if you don't get it, it's not ruining the movie for you. And if you do get it, it's like this really exciting thing to leave you on. Batman vs. Superman has an end credit sequence. It's just in the middle of the movie. It's in the middle of the climax, even.
Yeah. Well, and also, it's like if Samuel L. Jackson turned up and said, look, Tony, here's some computer files I want you to look at. And then what we see is someone's computer screen with them opening video files. In the middle of a movie, we see these tiny little video files open on the screen. And I hate the most, he had logos for them.
Oh, my God, I know. I mean, this is the introduction of the one of logos. This is like the introduction of the Justice League. This is Batman telling Wonder Woman there's others like us out there, and he does it via an email. And then there's like 3 minutes of her essentially watching teasers for the next 3 movies, and it keeps cutting back to Wonder Woman staring at the laptop, just being like, "Oh, interesting."
Yeah, it's just really, really bad movie making.
Yeah,
you know?
It really is.
That is just not a good way to make a big screen movie. To have a show for 10 minutes, someone looking at a laptop screen, clicking on icons and looking at really bad little surveillance footage. It was not at all exciting.
And she goes line by line on the email, too. Like, she, presses, down, and it's like, do you know anything about this? And then, the next line is dramatically revealed.
She scrolls down, yeah.
Very slow reader.
So I'm afraid I really don't have a lot of faith in their ability to do a Justice League movie now at all.
Oh, and I know, and the scene where I suppose it was the Flash comes from the dream sequence in the dream sequence, never spoken of again. Like, he has a vision to not trust Batman, or he has a vision that, kind of confirms his fears that he shouldn't trust Superman. Never mentions it again. It just happens. It's just, in the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
It's like another you could say there's 2 end credit scenes, except they're both in the middle of the movie.
And they put them in the middle.
All right, we got off track from the positives, though. I do want to try. Okay. Let's try to find some positives. You mentioned Alfred, and this is kind of a different. I think a lot of people know Alfred is kind of like the stuffy, Michael Caine type, frankly. And here he's like, a little. He seems more of a peer of Batman, right? Like, does that have a basis in Batman history?
He had that kind of military vet kind of feeling about him, didn't it? I think in a comic, in a graphic novel, Batman Earth 1, he's a bit more like that, a bit of a kind of tougher guy. He seemed like he could handle himself, and he takes over the Batplane at one point with joysticks in the Batcave. Yeah. Well, I like the fact they've grown older together, and it's not like, well, obviously he did know Batman when he was a boy. I don't know. They seem like the same age, don't they? Funnily enough,
they seem much closer to. They seem more like peers than obviously Christian Bale and Michael Caine.
Yeah, that's a good point. They seemed like about 40s and maybe 50s or 60 at the oldest. So yeah, interesting. They seem kind of more like vet buddies or something, like battle buddies. I liked Iron's performance there, kind of dry and witty. I think he was one of the best actors in the film, really. So again, I think it bodes well for a Batman movie. Yeah, perhaps directed by someone else. Yeah. I think those two could really
probably
really
Ben Affleck. I think he's making the Batman movie. Or maybe I'm assuming that. Okay. But
that would be good. That would be good. Affleck is a good director. I think he's a good actor, and I hope he doesn't feel too disheartened by the reaction to this movie and get put off making the Batman,
did you see that Sad Affleck video?
Yeah.
That video is fucking real. That thing, I tweeted that, I didn't like the movie, and then, I tweeted, I walked it back a little, and I think I actually felt guilty because I had seen that Sad Affleck video.
Yeah. I kind of like Affleck. I got to say, I like him. I like his kind of star persona, and I like him as Batman. I think he's got a real presence. He's got a real big physical presence. I like the way he came across. I like him as Bruce Wayne. And one other scene I liked. In fact, for the first 10 minutes of this movie, Jeff, I was thinking, this isn't so bad at all.
No, I thought that was cool to see the superhero fight from another perspective. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I thought when Bruce Wayne was driving into what is kind of clearly signaled as being like 9/11, when he's driving towards, he actually runs into kind of a cloud of smoke and rubble and saves people.
Again, a shot that was in the trailer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've seen it. You've seen all the good bits in the trailer, pretty much, I think. But I liked that. That was an interesting take on Bruce Wayne as someone who's really courageous, very moral, very, very motivated. He's just a normal guy, but a guy who's going to run toward a disaster rather than run away from it is an interesting kind of hero. So,
he has employees so loyal they won't leave the building until he calls them and tells them to go.
Yeah. Well, that guy turns out to be some kind of plot point.
Oh,
afterwards.
not the guy. There was the guy in the building too, though. The guy who, I guess, actually dies. He says a prayer before he dies. Bruce is trying to reach him on the phone.
Yeah, yeah. He won't leave until Master Wayne.
But that's
tells
another
him.
Scene where it's when you're watching, you're like, okay, it's sad because he sees die. But if you actually sit there and think about it, that guy, that Bruce is trying to call him doesn't matter. It's again, you can kind of see the machinations, trying to set up this moment that Zack Snyder really wants.
Yeah. But I thought that was a really interesting sequence, seeing that battle from
you're right.
ground level.
I took it negative again. You're right. That was a cool scene.
Yeah. Seeing the effect, I liked it very much, where we kind of see a replay of the Superman versus Zod battle from Man of Steel, but we're seeing kind of the effect of heat vision, as it would seem to mortals down on Earth. That was pretty interesting, actually. So yeah, that scene was good. I think all the scenes with Batman were kind of pretty good. I didn't really like the bit where he fashioned a kryptonite lance, because he had bullets, right? Why don't you just keep on making bullets and put them in your gun rather than make some kind of symbolic Knights of the Round Table thing?
You know exactly why, because Zack Snyder made this movie and he was like, Batman's got to have a spear.
Yeah, got to have a spear, yeah.
I mean, I was talking about the movie with my friends afterwards, and one of them was like, there was that scene where Lois Lane had to run back and get the kryptonite spear, and then he was like, I just heard myself. I just realized the sentence I just said.
Yeah, and she just put it there. She put the spear down. I don't even know where it was, in some pool somewhere. I don't even know what that was.
Yeah, she makes a little problem for herself where she throws it in the pool and then she goes in the pool.
I don't know, what was the pool? Where was the pool?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is that? What is that?
Where did that come from?
The
some kind of
movie's
Roman
just full of those. If you just and look, I know it's a comic book movie. I know it's got a man who can fly in it, and it's not supposed to stand up to intense scrutiny, but at a very basic level, you have to understand why a character is doing something in any given scene, and I feel like it doesn't pass that test.
Well, here we are, more good things. I thought Kevin Costner.
God damn it, it's so hard.
I thought Mara and Pa Kent,
they're good
roles, I guess. They bring some heart. Holly Hunter, I thought, was good for what she was given as a role of a senator.
Yeah, sure. She's always good. I actually thought she was pretty interesting because at first you were like, oh, she's an evil senator, and then you were like, oh, she's not totally evil. She's trying to get something done. So there was a degree of nuance there that I thought was kind of interesting. She was blown up halfway through the movie, of course, but
yeah, and I liked the music when Wonder Woman.
That Wonder Woman track really did stand out. You're right. That
was really good. But I tell you what, actually, I really disliked the rest of the music. I think it was Hans Zimmer. It was so overblown.
I don't know that I noticed it anywhere else, to be honest.
The music is kind of like this. The famous The Inception button. You're like, yeah. They were doing that a lot, and there were a lot of heavenly choirs, I think. I felt the music was very, very, very heavy-handed. There's even a bit where Batman does something to turn on his headlights, and there's a massive kind of chord. So even really minor moments, how Snyder's always showing bullet shells dropping in slow motion, we were getting kind of a massive chord as soon as they hit the ground. So I felt the music was kind of in keeping with the overburdened, overplayed nature of the visuals, apart from the Wonder Woman theme. So whoever did that, if that was Zimmer, well done.
Let me take a step away from the movie for a second. And all the times we've talked on this podcast, we usually keep it to the Bat family, and I don't know that we've actually talked about Superman before, or even Batman and Superman. In your mind,
we haven't had
do Batman and Superman, do they actually go together as a good team, or is that sort of forced, not just in this movie, but for decades and decades of comic book history, because they're the number one and two, the flagship characters of DC Comics?
Well, they do work together as a team. I think they work best as kind of like contrasts, really, because they're so different. I mean, the movie kind of tried to tap into this idea of God and man. You know, like Batman is a normal person. One of the key things about Batman is he has no metahuman abilities, but he's trained himself to peak ability. And Superman is an alien, a god who could destroy the Earth, you know, who could rule the Earth, but doesn't because he's inherently good. So they're very interesting characters, and the fact those are the two most popular in DC Comics, and they're often seen side by side, is interesting because they are so different. You've got an incredibly powerful guy, Superman. You've got, you know, a guy who's not even a guy, but who acts like a kind of all-American, even though he's an alien. And you've got Batman, who is incredibly mortal. So the fact that they can even fight side by side and be friends is interesting in itself, and they represent different ideas. You know, Batman is kind of outside the law, and Superman is sometimes called by Batman like a big blue Boy Scout. He's too kind of white bread. He's too kind of good. He's too innocent, too trusting, too naive. And Batman is the more cynical, skeptical counterpart who will do anything as long as it leads to an end. You know, so Batman will be brutal with criminals, and Superman, you know, Superman doesn't kill either, but Superman is much more straight down the middle, and Batman is more on the line between outlaw and legal.
Right.
So they're an interesting couple, yeah, and sometimes, you know, and they are treated in the comics as kind of friends, but what's interesting is how different they are, I think. So they're very interesting characters, yeah, put together.
There's no equivalent at Marvel where there's quite a dyad like that. Like, obviously you can team up Captain America and Iron Man, and that's great, and like they have a defined relationship, and they're great characters, and that's going to be fun. But they're not like quite like the Beatles versus the Stones, the way Batman versus Superman is. You know,
that's what it's like. And also at DC, they call it the Trinity with Wonder Woman.
Right, that's true.
So interesting.
That's because
because Wonder Woman is an Amazon. And so the fact that she can hang around with what I've always liked about Batman the best is he kind of earns the respect of people who have much more power than him. If you bring in people like Green Lantern, who's got the most powerful weapon in the universe in his ring, and people like the Flash, who's even faster than Superman in some stories, and the Martian Manhunter, who is a Martian, who's a shape changer. What's interesting to me about Batman is not only does he earn these guys respect, but they're kind of a bit afraid of him. So it's an interesting story, like kind of Prometheus, you know, that what human beings can do to actually get onto the level of gods by sheer intelligence and shrewdness and trickery. No, in Marvel is kind of making Captain America and Iron Man into that sort of pairing, but I don't think that pre-exists.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel's even doing Civil War II this summer as a comic book event, not the movie sequel quite yet. Yeah. And I believe I'm actually certain that I guess I'm not sure. It's not Iron Man versus Captain America. I believe it's Iron Man versus Miss Marvel. Or maybe it's Captain America versus Miss Marvel.
Isn't it? It's Captain Marvel, isn't it? Yeah.
The Lady Marvel character. Yeah. Is she Captain Marvel? Forgive me.
Well, there's two of them now. I think there's Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel, and I think it's
Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Forgive me. I wasn't just calling the Lady Captain Marvel Miss Marvel to like take her down a notch. There's also a character called Miss Marvel. That's where it got confused. Anyway, just that like they're a little more switch-outable than I think Batman versus Superman. If someone who saw this movie, maybe their appetite is stoked for some Batman versus Superman, but this didn't satisfy it. Are there any classic stories where the two team up or fight that you would recommend? Dark Knight Returns, which you have talked about a lot, is obviously at the top of that list.
Yeah, there's a really good book, actually. It's I believe it's written by Dave Gibbons, who was the artist on Watchmen. I believe it's drawn by Steve Rude, I think. We can look this up afterwards. But it's called World's Finest, which was the title of the comic book which first had Batman and Superman starring together. That was in the 40s, I think. It's a really, really good story. It's about it's got Joker and Luthor in it. And it explores the very different nature of Batman and Superman in a much more entertaining and coherent way than this movie. And also, it's I feel it's not for kids. It's not a silly book, but it's the kind of book you could probably give to a 12-year-old. You know, it's more family friendly for what that's worth. It's a kind of comic you could give to kids and say, these are interesting characters you might like to read more about.
You know, Joker and Luthor teaming up is interesting because that's almost like Batman versus Superman too. Like they sort of have a similar yin and yang thing going on, right? Like what brings those two together?
Those are interesting characters. Well, what really brings them together is simply their mutual hatred for their respective heroes. But they're very, very different characters. I mean, when they come together in movies, it's a tolerance rather than liking. They never like each other. It's always a temporary alliance, because Luthor, and I think this is how Luthor should be in the way Luthor is in the comics. It's just incredibly intelligent. He can just make decisions. He can make plans incredibly fast. And that's why, he should be different from Joker. And that's why I think this Eisenberg Luthor, who combines aspects of both, really doesn't work. Because I think Luthor should be totally different, really kind of cold, controlled, a great thinker, but not manic. Joker is unpredictable, whereas Luthor, I think, is incredibly logical.
Yeah, that's... I didn't dislike the Jesse Eisenberg performance, I think, as much as you did. But now that you're talking about it in terms of Joker, and like Joker also being in that universe via Suicide Squad, and presumably like they're all on a crash course for each other, like clearly putting that even though we haven't seen the Jared Leto Joker yet, it's any Joker next to this Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor is like gonna make them both a little worse, because like they're it's like Batman Forever, actually, where Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face is like trying to out Riddler the Riddler. He's trying to out Jim Carrey, and like it makes the whole thing a little worse.
Yeah, I think you've put it perfectly there. That's what we're going to get. If we get that Luthor with the Jared Leto Joker, it's going to be exactly like Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey. It's just going to be these two kind of pantomime villains trying to chew up the scenery more. They're just going to kind of like camp it up, aren't they? They're just going to keep turning it up higher, but they've both got the same shtick going on, this kind of crazy, manic, psychotic. So I think Ben Affleck is going to be in Suicide Squad, is what I heard. I think he's going to be the Batman. So in that movie. So if you bring those two villains together, the whole point, that part of the appeal about superhero stories, comics and movies, is the dynamic between them and the contrast, really. So if you have characters who are too similar, you're losing that. And that's what they have in the Avengers. Characters who clash. Even the characters who are on the same side have different personalities, like Steve and Tony, for instance, and you have the friendships between the characters and the rivalries and the arguments. And that's what makes these movies interesting, I think. Not the big action scenes and the combat and the explosions, but the fact that these are people, and how do they get along together, and how do they argue, and how do they form alliances, and how do they break up, and what do they feel, what is their motivation? So if you have two villains who are pretty much cut from the same cloth, you're unfortunately losing that.
Looking to the future a little, you brought up Suicide Squad. Are you at all are you optimistic about Suicide Squad? This is Bat adjacent. We're going to get our first cinematic Harley Quinn. The Joker's going to be there, obviously.
I think it was a good trailer. It's a very good trailer. It's cut very well to a Queen track.
Yep.
These aren't characters I feel particularly invested in. I think it's probably going to be a more entertaining movie, judging from the trailer, than Batman versus Superman. I wonder how it's going to fit into DC's cinematic universe. I mean, my prediction is it will do better. My prediction is it will be compared favorably to Batman vs. Superman, and people are going to say this is what Batman vs. Superman should have been like, more kind of lighthearted, not taking itself so seriously, not trying to deal with questions of philosophy, and telling a story in a straightforward way. It's not character; it's pretty minor characters, apart from Joker and maybe Harley Quinn. It's relatively
no one's like. I mean, even Will Smith is playing Deadshot. I want to say, like, I don't know anything about Deadshot.
It is, no, I don't know. And what's his name? What's the
Killer
crocodile?
Croc?
Killer Croc, isn't it? Yeah, I should know that. Yeah,
yeah, that's a Batman one. Yeah, these are not like. They're not Batman and Superman, frankly.
No, and perhaps that's why the movie is going to probably work better, because they're not playing with such high stakes and they can mess around more. Whereas Batman v Superman, it's like, you've got the three biggest characters in the DC universe there, and I guess the pressure is on to do something, and Snyder thought he had to deal with all these moral, philosophical questions. And perhaps he's just not a very good storyteller anyway. Perhaps he's just good at visual moments. But Suicide Squad, you've got a bunch of fun characters, you throw them together, it's like the A-Team, you're criminals, we can let you out to do a mission, a dangerous mission. That's very simple, you see. They're not dealing with questions about God and man and good and evil. So just tell an entertaining story.
Now, here's really an interesting one to me. What about the Justice League movie? Because even though I didn't like this movie, and I think it's possible I didn't like it, I liked it even less than you did. I really didn't like it.
Yeah.
I'm still probably going to... I have to be honest that I'm probably going to go see the Justice League movie, which is going to be like the direct follow-up that's directed by Zack Snyder. I guess some of it's about Superman coming back to life. I don't know. But presumably there's a scene in the desert where Batman shoots people or something like that. But I'm probably going to see it. I mean... Are you going to go see... It sounds like you're certainly open to seeing another Batman movie, another Wonder Woman movie, the Suicide Squad movie, but Zack Snyder's Justice League, which, by the way, is coming out in 2017. I looked it up. It's like a year away. It's so close. Would you see that?
Well, here's the irony, isn't it? I mean, this movie has got terrible reviews, but it's doing great box office. So there's people like me and you who know the movie's going to be bad, and we're still going to see it. And I guess I probably would see Justice League. I mean, partly just so I can have an opinion about it. I almost ask myself, are they still going to make this movie? I guess if it wasn't doing so well commercially, they might just junk the franchise.
Well, I think week 2 will be interesting because obviously right now there's a lot of people interested in seeing Batman vs Superman, but the word of mouth is really quite negative, even beyond this podcast, if you can believe it. And it'll be interesting to see where week 2 goes. And I feel like it could potentially be an Amazing Spider-Man 2 like situation where it doesn't like outright bomb and it makes like more money than any of us will ever dream of, but that is short of the expectations that this kind of production brings with it, and it derails future plans like Amazing Spider-Man.
Well, I guess there's no possibility now they're not going to make a Justice League movie. I mean,
I think they might even be shooting it.
Yeah. Perhaps they're going to do some reshoots or something. Anyway, it seemed to me that, and also a couple of things I read online to confirm that it's going to be about Darkseid, who's a massive villain in the DC universe.
His logo is... Sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, we see his symbol out in the desert.
Right.
The whole thing about the devil comes from the whole thing about the devil and everything that
the winged demons things in the dream sequence are a dark side thing too.
So unfortunately, that actually puts it on an even grander scale, which I don't think Snyder is very good at doing. I mean, I don't know what else he's good at, but he's good at doing movies about Spartans, I guess. No, but if it's about basically Superman, Batman, and the Justice League fighting a guy who's basically a god from an antimatter universe, it's just going to get bigger. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. So I think it's just going to be Batman v Superman, turned up, squared, or cubed, because the stakes are going to be higher. They're fighting this evil kind of godlike figure from an alternate universe.
Well, Will, I certainly hope you are willing to see the movie and come back on the show when that happens.
I'm depressed. Yeah, I wish it had been a better movie. I really do.
Of course. I mean, have you seen any other Batman stuff recently that has gotten your attention in the past, I don't know, year or so since you've been on the show?
I've been writing a book about David Bowie, Jeff. So
right, I emailed you. Can we talk about that briefly? Tell me about the David Bowie book. Thank you for coming out of Bat retirement for us. We very much appreciate it.
Out of retirement, yeah, like Batman, yeah.
And we should mention that you've written books about Batman.
Oh, yeah.
And people can go follow up. What is that called again?
There's one book called Batman Unmasked, and there's one book called Hunting the Dark Knight. I still get emails sometimes from people who've heard me on your show, and they ask me questions about Batman. So yeah, people are still listening to the old ones.
That's great. That's my favorite thing in the world to hear. So you've written books about Batman. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I would definitely recommend checking them out. They're great. But your next book is not about Batman. It's going to be about David Bowie. What about Bowie? There's so much to talk about.
It's about another character. It's another character who wears a lot of costumes and masks and has changed an awful lot over his long career. It's a bit similar to my Batman book, but about David Bowie. It's about kind of themes and concepts. It's not a biography. It's exploring themes that run throughout Bowie's work, his 50-year career, and that's due to come out on what would have been Bowie's 70th birthday, which is January of next year. So it's the same kind of thing I always do about studying popular icons, but it's looking at a guy who was real. Well, I know Batman is real to many of us, but I think he's a similar figure to Batman in a way, very kind of complex, appears in lots of different media, lots of different forms over decades, been interpreted in lots of different ways.
Reflects the era in which he is in.
Yep. Yeah. So if you like my books about Batman, it's that kind of book, but about Bowie, I would say.
Give me a quick tease. Like, what is a theme? Because obviously, I like most people, I think I greatly enjoy the music of David Bowie. I'm familiar with a lot of it, but I don't know that I know it well enough to like recognize themes that run through the work. Like, what is one theme that David Bowie keeps coming back to?
Ideas about, the real, for instance, about whether when he is showing kind of his real, authentic self. There's been times when he said, no, I've got no masks. This is the real me. But looking back, like for instance, in the early 1980s, in 1983, he said, this is the real me now. There's no more masks. But looking back, we can see that as another kind of front, another kind of persona. So ideas about authenticity, the self. Identity, who is the real person? Because of course David Bowie wasn't his real name in the first place.
Right.
You've got David Jones, who was born in Brixton in 1947, adopted the name David Bowie, and then adopted another name, Ziggy Stardust. So he had to kind of create these characters in order to perform, but they're all further away from himself. So I guess it's about ideas about, who is the real us? What does Bowie tell us about ourselves and personality as well?
Well, that sounds awesome. You will have to let me know when that's out.
Sure.
So one, I can read it, and two, I can tell the listeners. And how can people find you online? How can they bother you with questions about Batman and David Bowie and anything else in between?
Okay. Let's see. They could go on Twitter at Will Brooker on that. They can find me on that.
Will,
yeah.
Thank you for seeing this movie and coming back on the show and talking about it.
I've seen it. Yeah, I saw it especially for you.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I saw it. I also. I probably would have seen it eventually, but I made a point of seeing it opening weekend so we could do this podcast. So listeners, please appreciate the hard work that goes into the show for you.
We suffered for it.
We suffer for our art. Will, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Bye-bye now.
That's our show. Thanks for listening. At the end of the last episode, I promised that the next episode was going to be an interview with the fine people behind the website, Reductress.com. That didn't happen. I think we can all agree I should probably spend more time looking at calendars, but I didn't, and then I saw Batman vs. Superman was coming out. I knew we wanted to do something about that, so I pushed that back just a little. The Reductress episode is going to come out, get ready for this, next week, not 2 weeks from now. I am not misspeaking. I want to get this thing back on track, back on the calendar, so next week we will have an episode about Reductress, and I encourage you to come check that out. Lots more future good Jeff Rubin shows in the pipeline. I gotta tell you, I think I'm getting pretty close. I think I got a pretty solid lead on one I've been looking for a while. I've been searching for someone who won a Nickelodeon Takes Over My School contest, which has proved difficult. And I don't know that I found someone who won, but I think I found someone who was at a school where someone else won and the school was taken over. And I think I'm willing to live with that. So that's coming up soon, and lots more great Jeff Rubin shows. You can hear about them first at jeffrubinshow.com or on my Facebook page or at Jeff Rubin Show, or you guys know the shtick. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back in 1 week. Bye.